Hello, good morning. Welcome back to Emoji Economics. It's morning right here in Nigeria. It's almost 7:30 a.m. as at this particular day. Anyway, if this is the first time that you are attending one of our classes, make sure you click the subscribe button. Immediately you do that, a bell button is going to appear, and make sure you click the bell button as well. The bell is meant for creating awareness. It's meant to notify you when new classes are made available. So what shall we be talking about today? We'll be talking about the ISLM model. Now you see, the ISLM model analysis is talking about what happens on the short run, basically. So it's all about short run. Everything that it's talking about is about short run. Over time, when we start discussing when it's going to be applicable in the medium run and long run and all of that. But what's the basic understanding of ISLM is, revolves around the short run. Now you see, before actually attending this class, so if you are a new member of, if you are a new student or you are a new viewer, so there are classes that you really have to see before you see this particular class, because I might be saying some things that you won't or that you don't really get to understand unless you've read around them before. Okay, because our classes are usually in sequence, and they are chronological in nature. So before you talk about the ISLM model, because the ISLM model brings into consideration three different markets. So the goods market, the money market, as well as the labor market. Now we've had classes on the goods market, we've had classes on the money market, we've had classes on the labor market. Okay, so and that is why we can, proceed with this particular class where we combine all of those together. So I will try my best to leave the links to the playlist of those preliminary classes in the description of this particular one. So I'll be leaving the links. To the playlist on the goods market, the playlist on the money market, and the playlist on the labor market. Okay, so it is better you attend those classes first. That is, if this is your first class. Okay, because I believe other people must have been following up. So it's better you attend those classes first before attending this particular one, or you attend this and then go back to all of those classes for a better understanding. All right. So let's come back to what the class is all about. So what is the IS curve? What is the IS curve? IS, there is IS curve, there's LM curve, and there's the FE curve. Now the IS is talking about investment and savings. It's talking about money demand, money supply, and the FE curve is talking about the full employment position, which is talking about the equilibrium in the labor market as well. Now let's start with the IS curve, because we can't see everything in a single class. Now the IS curve is a curve in which every point on it shows equilibrium in the goods market. So that's basically what the IS curve is. So whenever you see an IS curve, every point on it. So if you're familiar with your indifference curve, you already understand, and you must have understood that every point in an indifference curve gives a consumer the same amount of utility. As well, if you're familiar with isoquants, talking about microeconomics now, so every point on an isoquant also gives you, it talks about different combinations of labor and capital that give you the same amount of, that gives a producer that yields the same amount of output. So that's kind of the logic that was for the IS curve, the LM curve, and all of that. So IS curve is simply a curve in which every point on it, represents different combination of interest rates and output that shows equilibrium in the goods market. So we'll get to that. We'll get to understand that in a bit. Now, what is the goods market? So that's the question. So the goods market is a market where commodities are sold. So where goods and services are sold. So that's just your normal market. So, all right. Now, in the goods market, AE, which is the aggregate expenditure function, like I said, that there are classes you should have seen before seeing this particular one. But if you've read enough, no problem. Let's move. So AE is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M, where AE is aggregate expenditure, C is aggregate consumption. He's talking about total domestic private investment, government spending. He's talking about exports, and this is talking about import. So your aggregate expenditure is equal to all of this. So the individual expenditures on all of this. So aggregate is talking about the entire economy. Now at equilibrium. Now this is also known as, so you might have this as the aggregate expenditure function. It might be called the AG. It depends on the textbook you're reading. So at equilibrium, Y equals AE. Y is national output, the total output produced in an economy, equals AE. Now you see, I think I made errors during my undergraduate days. I'm not so sure of just writing AE equals C plus I plus G, and then I just jump to Y equals this and this, and I keep solving. There are times you solve and we don't even really know what we are solving. You just want to solve and get an answer, be done with that exam, and just get out. All right. But in this particular thing, y is only equal to AE at a single point. At a single point. So it is very, very important to note that at equilibrium, y equals AE. Okay. Now there's a way to express C. C equals, which is consumption equals A plus B into bracket y minus t. So I don't think that should be a problem. Consumption equals the autonomous consumption plus all of this in this consumption. This is the MPC. This is income, and this is tax. So y minus t is going to give us disposable income. All right. And the t here is lump sum. It's not proportional to whatever income that someone is earning. So I is assumed to be exogenously determined. So what I mean is I is not determined within the model. So I equals I, basically G is not determined within the model as well. G equals G. X export is a function of a lot of things. Exchange rate, the income of the country that is buying your own export. Alright, so but here we express export as a function of foreign income alone. Exchange rate is not there. We don't really need it in this analysis. So M, which is import, is a function of your own income, your country's income. Of course, whatever you're going to import into your country depends on exchange rates and depends on the income that individuals, everybody in the economy has, those that are doing importation anyway. So M equals MY. Alright. So equilibrium in the goods market means Y equals AE, alright, or Y equals AD, or S equals I. Alright, so when we are saying that the goods market is in equilibrium, what we simply mean is Y equals AE, Y equals AD, or S equals I. Now, that is, I've explained this, output equals aggregate expenditure. That is, the total value of the output depends on the total expenditure on those outputs. So they should be the same. Now, output equals aggregate demand. So whatever is produced is equal to whatever is sold. Simple. Now, savings equals investment. It is the same thing. What is saved in an economy is equal to what is invested. Now, let me prove this for you mathematically so that we don't get to cram it. So Y equals C plus I plus G. Just to, I'm trying to make it simple, okay? Not bringing the x minus m yet. Then, so what we just have to do is bring C to this side. So we have y minus c equals I plus g. Still the same thing. Alright. Then we subtract t from both sides. That is from the left hand side and from the right hand side. So t wasn't there initially. So in case you want to wonder. Alright, so we just try to subtract it from both sides. So this becomes y minus c minus t equals I plus g minus t. Now, y minus c minus t is private savings. Yeah, that's what private. We've talked about national savings, and I think we have a video on national savings basically. So which is one of the classes that you really have to attend to understand some of these things. So I plus g minus t, of course. So this is private savings, then equals investment plus g minus t. So we try to bring g and t to the left hand side. So by the time we do that, this is a minus t here, so it becomes a plus t. Then plus g becomes a minus g. So t minus g, that is tax revenue minus government spending, will give us the government saving. What government is basically saving if the value is not zero. So private saving plus government saving equals investment. So private saving plus government saving gives us national saving, and national saving equals investment. So savings equals investment, which is what we have here. So don't let that bother you. Now in the IS, for us to talk about ISLM properly, there are assumptions. Now the assumptions are, I think there are more than this. Yeah, I think I forgot to leave to add one particular one. So one is that net export is zero. At least for us to begin with, we have to come from the simpler stuff, like that, so that by the time we get to the difficult, or the things that were meant to be difficult, because of the basic understanding that you've had, those ones won't be that difficult. So assumptions: net export equals zero. So that is there that NX is zero. That is, there is no interaction with foreign economies. Okay, so which means x minus m is zero. So we are left with c plus n plus g. Now the other one is investment is a function of y and r. So what we mean here is that investment is no longer exogenously determined. Investment is determined now within the model. So that's what we mean, that investment now is a function of y and I. So what we are trying to say here is, so I've tried to write it out in form of a function. So investment is equal to beta minus qi, which is the interest rate. Of course, the interest relationship between investment and interest rate is negative, plus something like ohms, and income or output. So let me just call this output or output. So why is output? So it's going to start with everything that we're trying to do. So investment is a function of interest rates. Okay, so it has a negative relationship with interest rates and a positive relationship with output. Now, when output rises, the income of everyone responsible for the output rises. And you know, the income includes the income of firms, it also includes the income of consumers, households, because these are the ones that are providing the factors of production to the firms and all of that, including their labor services and all of that. Now, when output rises, the income of all of these people rise. So for investors, when their income rises, so they have more to put aside, for further investment. So we expect that an increase in output will increase investment at the end of the day. All right. And for consumers, increase in output leads to increase in. I'm talking about aggregate income here. Leads to increase in aggregate income. So they have more money and they can go to the goods market to spend a lot of things. So that is to tell us that an increase in output, which is also what is here, why, leads to an increase in aggregate consumption. Now, all of those trends continue to happen through the multiplier effect until we get to where the final point where the final curve is going to shift to. Now, I mentioned multiplier effect. We've also talked about that in the playlist that I mentioned. So, go through it. It's a very, very wonderful class. I believe you are going to learn a lot about multiplier than you ever knew what multiplier was. All right. So that this investment now is a function of interest rate and output. So this is minus and this is plus. So y now equals c plus I plus g. So y equals c itself is a plus b into bracket y minus t plus what is I? I is this, so just writing it. Then g is of course still exogenously determined. Government spending is determined by other things besides interest rate and output. Alright, so at the end of the day we now have y equals so this is trying to tell you that this is consumption. So y equals, this is c. So y equals consumption, and consumption is a function of y and t. That is, consumption is a function of disposable income. What we already have here. Where is it? Show me. Yeah, what we already have here. So consumption, these are parameters, so they are not variables. So consumption is a function of this variable and this variable. So that is why you have y equals, so this is representing the consumption function. So y equals consumption, which is a function of y minus t, that is a function of disposable income, where t here could be lump sum and could be proportional, but here it is still lump sum. Now plus I, so investment is a function of interest rates and output, national output, what you have here, plus g. So now all of this is what we call the IS relation. Simple. IS. So it's not something that you're meant to cram, basically. So it's something that you're meant to understand. So y is a function of, y is consumption, and consumption is a function of disposable income plus investment, and investment is a function of interest rate and national output, and plus government spending. So what's adding that? Of course. So that is what we call the IS relation, and you really have to note this because we shall be using this henceforth as long as we're talking about the IS LM model and all of that. Okay, so how do we then derive the IS curve? How do we derive the IS curve? You see, in the goods market, this is basically what we have. We have the 45-degree line that represents the potential GDP, or you can just call it the output. All right. So I believe we've spoken about all of this before. Then we have the aggregate expenditure line. So this is the aggregate expenditure line, which is the C plus I plus G. So before you get to the equilibrium, now this is equilibrium. So this is the only place where Y is equal to AE. And that was what I was trying to note here. Where is it? That's what I was trying to note. At equilibrium, Y equals AE. You can see from this graph that Y is not equal to AE at every point. So it's only happening at a particular point. Good. So Z is talking about autonomous aggregate expenditure. We've spoken about all of this before. Aggregate expenditure that is not due to changes in income. Simple. Alright. So don't let us waste time on that. 45-degree line and all of that. So AE equals C plus I plus G, right? How do we then derive the IS curve? So you just sketch another graph right under this particular graph. Now let us see what we're gonna have. So this graph is just telling us that this Y that you have here, now we are plotting interest rates against the national output. So this Y that we have here is the same Y that is here. So it's the same Y. So I call it Y1, it's the same Y1. All right, and this is why this one is occurring at a particular interest rate. All right, it's happening at a particular interest rate. So let's call it I1. It's happening at a particular interest rate. Of course, we can also say it's happening at a particular particular. Let's just continue. Let's put ourselves with that. But of course, once the IS, for us to draw the IS curve, interest rate is plotted on the vertical axis, and output, national output, is plotted on the horizontal axis. So there is already an interest rate that is yielding this amount of output. Remember that interest rate is a function of investment is a function of interest rate. All right. So we could as well say that there is a level of investment where this output is occurring. You understand? And we could say that there is a level of consumption where this output is occurring. But for us to draw the IS, for us to sketch the IS, for us to sketch the IS curve, so we are going to say there is a level of interest rate, that this output is occurring. So there's a level of interest rate that makes the AE to be here, it intersects the 45-degree line here, and then gives us this equilibrium output. Okay, so now what happens when the interest rate rises? When the interest rate rises, what happens? So I really want us to know something. When the interest rate rises, so you come back to the components of the AE. The components of the AE, where are they? So you have C plus I plus G, of course. Now the investment is already this. So when interest rate rises, interest rate is only found in the investment function. Let's just come back to this relation. Do we have interest rate in the consumption relation? Nope. Do we have it in the investment relation? Of course, yes. Do we have it in the government spending? Nope. All right. So here, interest rate, changes in interest rate would affect investment. It won't affect any of this, at least initially. All right. So if interest rate should rise, then the cost of borrowing is already high, and we expect that investment should reduce. So which is what is here? So an increase in interest rates will reduce investment that is due to interest rates. All right, because there's a negative relationship between investments and interest rates. All right. So when this rises, investment does what? Investment falls. Now we have the first AE. We have the first AE to be C plus I plus G. Now the second AE now is already reducing. Do you know why? Because C plus investment is already reducing. Alright, so we expect this to be a lower value. Now if investment reduces, of course, what's going to happen? The output produced falls. Yeah, investment reduces, output produced does what? It falls. And when the output produced falls, that goes on to affect consumption, because consumption is dependent on that output. So that goes on to affect consumption reduces. So again, you have another reduction. Consumption now reduces. So this reduces because this guy reduces, and this is still this. Now consumption that reduces, we also lower demand for output. Now the reduction in the demand for output will go on to reduce investments that firms make again. So all of those things, so we have this reducing again, AE, because this guy reduced, then this guy is like a double reduction, and G still, what is it? So everything that's happening here now depends on the size of the multiplier. Okay, so the amount of reduction that will finally happen depends on the size of the multiplier. But the basic thing that I want us to get is there's going to be a reduction in AE. Now, interest rate, because I was wondering that is it going to be a shift or a rotation of the AE curve? Of course, now we are sure that AE is going to fall, basically. So is AE going to fall? Is it going to be a shift? Or is it going to be a rightward rotation? So that made me to go back to what we call the concept of the autonomous expenditure and the induced expenditure. So you say that you really have to go back to those classes. Now, autonomous expenditure, when we're talking about the induced expenditure, that is the expenditure that occurs due to changes in income. So every variable you find in the induced expenditure function, or what is that I can call it. So all of those variables are due to changes in y. Now just changes in y alone. Good. Now you see the autonomous, in our autonomous expenditure, these are expenditure variables that do not change as income changes. So if your y becomes zero, you still have a positive autonomous expenditure. Do you get that? So now interest rate is actually a part of autonomous expenditure. Interest rates, I said induced expenditure is all about changes in y, right? So interest rates is a part of the autonomous expenditure. So there was this class that we had under the goods market, of course, where I was talking about this. That was the beginning, because you really have to understand it. That was the beginning. You have to differentiate between autonomous expenditure and this expenditure, plotting of this graph. All right. So we derive this function, the equilibrium y, and then interest rates happens to be on the autonomous component. All right, good. So if interest rate is on the autonomous component, so a change in interest rate would definitely reduce our autonomous expenditure. We definitely change our autonomous expenditure. Now that interest rate is rising, all right, that lowers investment and lowers all of these things, as I said earlier. So that is going to shift this curve, because there's going to be a new, which I call Z1, there's going to be a new autonomous expenditure line, all right, which is just going to be something like this. Which is going to be something like this. At the end of the day, when all of this has happened, so it's going to be something like that. So at the end of the day, it's going to be something like that. So we have, remember that this has increased to I2, interest rate has increased to I2, and that was what was responsible for this. So you plot this like this. So this is a drop here. All right, and then we bring this down. So we have Y2. Cool. So where is the intersection between the new interest rate and the new output? That intersection occurs here. So this is it. So this was point A, this is point B, and then you plot this thing, and this is what we call the IS curve. So IS curve. Have you seen it? Simple. So the IS curve is downward sloping. So every point on this represents, represents equilibrium in the goods market. So now this A, this is point A. Let me call this point C, so we don't confuse ourselves. So let me call this point C. So point C brought us to this output. See, this is an equilibrium, and that equilibrium is brought here. And then this is a new equilibrium again, and that equilibrium is traced downwards. So you see, IS curve is downward sloping. Cool. So what's difficult? So that is that for you, and that brings us to the end of this class. In our next class, we'll be talking about things that shift the IS curve. Now, you see, interest rates would make you move along this curve. When interest rates goes from I1 to I2, we move from A to B. If interest rates should fall from I2 to I1, we move from B to A. All right. So interest rate causes a movement along the IS curve. So whatever is going to cause a shift in this curve is neither going to be I nor Y. So it has to be something else. And those something else can be found in the IS relation. All right, in the IS relation. So thank you very much for seeing this class. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them in the comment section. If I forget to leave the links to those previous classes, please make sure you remind me by commenting in the comment box. And please subscribe and turn on notifications. Subscribe does two things. It brings the bell that notifies you when new classes are available, and it also helps us to increase our YouTube community. Right now we have 682 members right now as I speak, and we need to get this channel across to thousands and thousands of students out there that really need this. I will need your help. So subscribe, turn on notifications, share this video with your friends, talk about it with your colleagues, and so on and so forth. Just we're ready for you at Emoji Economics. We try to give you the best. See you next time.